So Roki Sasaki, the sweepstakes, they're heating up. Roki Sasaki, 23-year-old phenom from Japan. And just to put it into perspective, Yamamoto, he is 25, well, was 25 years old when he signed with the LA Dodgers. Roki Sasaki, a little bit different, a few years younger, but the numbers are very well in comparison with Yamamoto. And he kind of has better stuff than Yamamoto. We saw Yamamoto this year in the bigs. And even the scouting report coming over, it was kind of replicated from what he was in Japan to now. Obviously, he went through the injuries his first year in the MLB, adjusting to that. He's going to have a little bumps in the road, which he did. He had a 3 ERA last year with a 7-2 record. But in the playoffs, Yamamoto actually pitched very well. But this year, flat 3 ERA, 7-2, 90 innings pitched, 105 strikeouts in those 90 innings. But here's the difference between Yamamoto and Sasaki. 1, the age, 2, the money, and 3, most importantly, is the stuff. Because I think Sasaki has better stuff. And I know we've never seen him pitch in the MLB yet. But based off the scouting report, first off, before we even get into the scouting report with his lights out fastball that touches 102, let's get into his numbers in Japan. So Yamamoto's numbers in Japan, career ERA, 7 years, career ERA was 1.72. That was Yamamoto. Sasaki, his career ERA across 4 seasons is 2.02. He's coming off a 2024 year where he went 10-5 in 18 games with a 2.35 ERA. But 2023, that was his money year. That's when everybody got intrigued by this guy. A 1.78 ERA across 15 starts. 2022, 2.02 ERA in 20 games. In 2021 overall, he had a 1.84 ERA. And keep in mind the age. The age is the biggest factor. He's going to pitch at 23 years old for the entire 2025 season. And the Mets have talked to him. The Yankees have talked to him. The Dodgers have talked to him. The Padres have talked to him. John Morosi recently tweeted out just yesterday, he met with the Dodgers, Padres, Giants, Mets, Yankees, Cubs, and Rangers. Now, I don't want to believe that he's going to be a Met or he's going to be a Yankee until he signs with one of those teams, because we all know the LA Dodgers are the premier team. Why? Because just for Japanese pitchers alone, Japanese players alone, Shohei Ohtani, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, perfect examples. West Coast is just closer to Japan than the East Coast is to Japan. Kodai Senga is an outlier. Tanaka was an outlier with the Yankees. But New York, both teams, I think what they have to offer, well, the Yankees, I know they already have their aces, right? They have Garrett Cole, just signed Max Fried, Louis Heel. I mean, if you want to call him an ace in the future, you could, because he's a young pitcher, had great stuff last year. When he's in command of that zone, he's a great pitcher, one of the best in the league. We saw in the first half, he was one of the best pitchers in the American League. And then his stuff kind of lost control a little bit. And then that's when he falls behind the count. That's where Heel struggles. But the Yankees could still use a lights out pitcher, especially because they're looking to shop Marcus Stroman. Reports came out just as yesterday that Marcus Stroman is on the trade block for the Yankees. And we're going to get into Louis Arraez in a little bit too. It could be either because they're preparing to bring Sasaki in this rotation, or maybe both, because Sasaki isn't going to cost a lot of money. He's in the international signing pool. He's not going to command money that Yamamoto commanded. That's obvious. But he will eventually. And this is where I think the Mets kind of play. They kind of have an advantage here, because his agent over the winter meeting said they love Jeremy Hefner and what he's able to do with pitchers. So if Sasaki wants to have success, kind of like what Ohtani did with the Angels, right? He went to somewhere where there's not going to be a lot of pressure on him. But at the same time, there's going to be a lot of pressure if you go to the Mets or the Yankees, because both of those teams are trying to win a World Series. Yankees were just in the World Series. Mets were 2 wins away and just signed Juan Soto, the largest contract in professional sports history. So whatever team he goes to, Mets, Yankees, or Dodgers, he's going to have a lot of pressure. But at the same time, he could go to a team like the Padres. He could go to a team like the Cubs and the Rangers, and he's not going to have as much pressure as he would with those 3 premier big market teams. So that's where I think, but at the same time, if he's going to go to a big market team, he might as well go to the Dodgers. That's why I think he's going to go to the Dodgers. But the Mets and the Yankees, I think they're both kind of need him, because Garrett Cole's on the north side of 30. Max Fried is 30. Louis Heel, say what you want about him. I don't want to say he's going to be a bona fide stud ace, even in a few years. Now, he does have that potential based off what he did in the first half of last year. He was the reigning AL Rookie of the Year. But at the same time, they need young arms. And the Mets need arms. Not necessarily just young arms. Mets need arms. Because right now, you look at the Mets rotation. Mets rotation, number one is probably either Senga or Manaea. You can bump those two, one or two, either or. I don't care. Both of them, I think, when healthy, Kodai Senga is the best pitcher in this Mets rotation, but that's a question mark. Sean Manaea, I'd probably put at number 2 to start the year. I think he's probably going to get the opening day nod, but I think Kodai Senga, if he's healthy, will end up being the ace of the staff. David Peterson at your number 3, Clay Holmes at your number 4, and Frankie Montas at your number 5. Now, Kodai Senga, similar to all Japanese pitchers, they pitch in a 6-man rotation. So the Mets still, if they want Senga to kind of have that 6-man rotation, I think it makes perfect sense to sign Sasaki, because then you can leave out Tyler McGill, you can leave out Paul Blackburn, you can leave out Jose Budo. I don't think any Mets fan wants to see those guys in the rotation. We're going to get into the Yankees fit with Sasaki in a little bit, but let's start off with the Mets. So the Mets, the reason they need Sasaki is because he changes the whole entire complexion of the Yankees. And here's why Sasaki could want to come to the Mets, because he'd be the bona fide ace, or at least the premier pitcher. At least that's what Mets fans would see him as great as Kodai Senga and as great as a year that David Peterson has, and as great of a year that Sean Manaea had. Sasaki would be the headline guy, maybe not the best guy right away, but he would eventually, based off the stuff he has. A 102 mile per a fastball that did touch 102 miles per hour in 2023 averaged 98.8 miles per hour on that pitch. In 2024, he averaged a little bit less, but still 96.8, still very high. But most of the time it's between 95 and 99. Other pitches that he has a splitter, which is a great pitch that he throws very well. He also has a sweeper. Yes, a sweeper or a slurve, whatever you want to call it. But the guy has really good stuff. I think better stuff than Yamamoto. So that's why I think he's kind of a bigger ticket, not only because of the stuff that he has. He's coming into the league at a younger age than Yamamoto, but he's also going to have 6 years of control. That's huge. Now, I know they signed him to that massive, massive long-term deal. The Dodgers signed Yamamoto to that massive long-term deal. But 6 years of control for a 23-year-old stud. I mean, he's going to be 29. And if he's going to want a big contract at 29 years old, I think his best bet is going somewhere where he thinks he can not only be good, but just get better and better and better and better. So if he does really want to get better and better and better and better, so at 29 years old, he can get that massive contract that Yamamoto got. One, I don't think he's going to like a 10-year deal at 29 years old as a free agent pitcher. But if he's going to want like a 6, 7, 8-year deal, similar to what Max Fried just got, similar to what Blake Snell just got with the Dodgers, if he's going to want one of those deals at age 29, he's going to have to get better and better and better. And Jeremy Hefner, what does he do with pitchers? He makes them better. Now, you would have to have a lot of trust in Jeremy Hefner if you're Roki Sasaki. And apparently, well, not apparently, his agent said straight up in the winter meetings, he loves Jeremy Hefner, loves what he does with him. And he would change, like I said before, he would change the whole entire complexion, because if you slot in Roki Sasaki in this rotation, then you're talking of a rotation with Kodai Senga, Sean Manaea, Roki Sasaki, and you bump David Peterson down to your number 4 starter, who's coming off a great year where you had 10 wins and a 2.90 ERA, and you have Frankie Montas as your number 5, and then Clay Holmes as your number 6. And say what you want about Frankie Montas and Clay Holmes, but if they're your 5 and 6 starters, and Sean Manaea is your 2 or 3, or Kodai Senga is your 2 or 3, and Sasaki's your number 1, that is a great rotation. The Mets have probably, I would say, an average at best starting rotation. They get Roki Sasaki automatically right away. They have one of the best rotations in the league. It sounds crazy to say, but that's what Roki Sasaki can do for the Mets rotation. Now, the Mets, they have a lot of competition, obviously, because of the Dodgers and the Yankees. I think those are the 3 premier teams that Sasaki will sign with. I think it's one of those 3. Because I get, his agent said he's not really good with the media over the winter meetings. He said all this. He's not really good with the media. He doesn't like big markets. But at the same time, if you want to make money just without having that, international sign-in pool contract, the sponsorships you can get in New York, the sponsorships you can get in LA with the Dodgers, it's a no-brainer for a guy that's going to sign for a low deal like Roki Sasaki will. So that's where I think the Mets and the Yankees have the edge, because the Dodgers, they already have so many premier guys. I mean, you got Blake Snell, you got Tyler Glasnow, you got Shohei Ohtani, you got Yoshinobu Yamamoto. They have studs in that rotation. I saw something just a few weeks ago where the Cy Young odds came out. The Dodgers have, I think, 3 or even 4 guys in the top 10 to win the AL Cy Young, odds-wise. Like, that's insane. So if you want to be the premier guy, I think if he goes to the Yankees, he could be the premier guy because Garrett Cole's not getting any younger. Max Fried is not getting any younger. He would be better. I would say he will be better than Louis Heel. I can confidently say that. And that's not a knock on Louis Heel. And same thing for the Mets. He'd automatically be that headline premier guy in that rotation. Whether he's number 1, number 2, or number 3, I think he would probably start off as a number 3 just because it's his first year pitching in the bigs. If you gave him an opening day start for his first ever start in the MLB, that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure for that young 23-year-old pitcher who's going to be pitching at 23 for the entire year. I mean, Sasaki, I think the Mets need him the most out of all these teams. They need him the most out of all these teams. But that doesn't necessarily he's just going to come here. But what they do have is kind of similar. What I think kind of played a role in the Juan Soto sweepstakes is, listen, if you are the guy on the New York Mets and you win with the New York Mets, you don't even really need to win a World Series. I mean, look at David Wright. Perfect example. David Wright is getting his number retired, going into the Mets Hall of Fame. Arguably, a lot of Mets fans want to say that he is a Hall of Famer, but I mean, really only 7 to 8 good years, really good years, but that's not Hall of Fame worthy. Didn't win a championship, but we still regard him as one of the best. One of the like Mike Piazza, another guy. He didn't win a World Series with the Mets, but you don't even have to win and you become the ultimate guy. So that's why I think the Mets could use in their conversations. Maybe they already used it in the conversation they had with Sasaki. And the Yankees could use that same thing. We haven't won a championship since 2009. You win a World Series with the New York Yankees. I mean, you're enriching yourself in baseball history, especially if you're the premier guy in that rotation, especially if you're the ace of the staff. And then come down in a few years when Garrett Cole's gone and Max Fried is on the tail end of his contract. I mean, Roki Sasaki would be that premier guy for the Yankees. Whereas the Dodgers, Yamamoto's 25. They already have Ohtani. They already have Blake Snell. They already have Tyler Glasnow. He's not going to be the premier guy for the Dodgers. So that's where I think the Mets and the Yankees have the advantage over the Dodgers. But the Dodgers, I mean, he's friends with Ohtani. He's friends with Yamamoto. He's closer to Japan if he's playing on the West Coast. So that's where I think the Dodgers have the clear advantage. I still think he's going to go to the Dodgers at the end of the day, but don't rule it out. Don't rule it out. All right, so that's the Sasaki thing, but you just look at his numbers, man. I'm going to go over it one more time before I get off the Sasaki sweepstakes. I mean, that 2.35 ERA just last year in 2024 for Japan. 2023, the 1.78 ERA. I mean, that's eye-popping, man. That is eye-popping. Then you look at Yamamoto's numbers. Yamamoto, his last year in Japan. Let's see. 2023. I mean, Yamamoto's insane in Japan. He went 17-6 with a 1.16 ERA. That's insane. 1.68 ERA in 2022. I mean, Yamamoto, he's got great stuff, like off speed, doesn't throw as hard, but Sasaki, I think, could develop into a better pitcher just because he's younger. And, you know, he hasn't really pitched in a lot of games in Japan. So that's another thing. But I mean, Sasaki, man, touching 102 on that fastball, the way he would change the whole entire outlook of this Mets rotation just in a blink of an eye. I mean, I'll say it one more time. That rotation with Sasaki, 6-man rotation, be huge for Kodai Senga, obviously huge for Sasaki. I think it would be huge for not only those two guys, but all the guys in the rotation. Gives them a lot of breathing room. I mean, you're talking Sasaki, Senga, Minaya, and Minaya is your 3. He was our ace last year, and we were 2 wins away from the World Series. Now you plug him in as the number 3. I mean, that your top 3 guys, potential all-stars right there. David Peterson had a great year last year as your number 4. That's great. And then Frankie Montas, maybe he can hit that pitching lab. You know, I'm not confident that he can have a Luis Severino turnaround, but you know what? I can't rule it out because what David Stearns and Jeremy Hefner are doing, they're doing something right. And then you got Clay Holmes rolling the dice with him as a starter. I mean, it's not intriguing, but at the same time, his ground ball rate, he had the highest ground ball rate in all of baseball last year. So, I mean, you get 140, 150 innings out of Clay Holmes, let's say sub 4.10 ERA. I think that's a plus for the Mets. That's a plus. That's what you expect out of Clay Holmes. And if you can get better, sign me up for it. In worst case, you bump him to the bullpen. And speaking of bullpen, let's get into the bullpen for the Mets, because we saw that they recently met with Tanner Scott, stud of an arm, one of the best relievers in baseball. I'd say him, Devin Williams, maybe Edwin Diaz when he's at his best. I still like the idea of Jeff Hoffman in this bullpen. I think he would be a little bit cheaper than Tanner Scott, but Tanner Scott, we haven't seen a lot of bullpen arms come off the board in this offseason. And I think it's because Tanner Scott is the premier guy of the free agent class for relief pitchers. I mean, you could say Clay Holmes came off the board, but at the same time, Clay Holmes he got signed as a starter. So I think Tanner Scott is going to set the market for these relief pitchers. Pitched in Miami in the beginning of the year, then went to San Diego, but in Miami in 44 games, lights out stuff, 44 games, 1.18 ERA. Then he goes over to San Diego, 28 games, which is insane. He pitched in 72 games, almost half the games he appeared in. Went to San Diego, a little bit less success, but still a 2.73 ERA. In the playoffs, he was very good. Didn't allow a single run over 4.1 innings of work. He hasn't allowed a single run across all of his postseason appearances. Even with Miami in 2023, only 1 inning, but still no earned runs. He's got 8 strikeouts and 5.1 playoff innings. Tanner Scott is intriguing. Career ERA is wild, especially for a relief pitcher. 3.56. I mean, it's not great, but at the same time, he's a relief pitcher. And I think the best part about Tanner Scott is it's 2 consecutive great years. 2 consecutive great years. We're talking from 2023 to 2024, obviously. 2.04 ERA, 146 games. In those 146 games, 188 strikeouts. Only 34 earned runs allowed. So 150 innings of work out of him in the last 2 years, and he's also only allowed 6 home runs. So he doesn't give up the home run ball a lot. Now, that's what you want out of a relief pitcher. You don't want to give up home runs. So I think Tanner Scott, if he came to the Mets, I think we'd start seeing bullpen arms fly off the board, whatever team he signs with. But you have a back end of the bullpen of Jose Butto, Tanner Scott, Edwin Diaz. I do like the idea of bringing Ryan Stanek back, and then you can have Jose Butto be in that long relief role. But I'm not opposed to having Jose Butto be a setup man in this bullpen, maybe even a long setup man, because he can go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He was a starting pitcher. He can go innings. He can get innings. But Tanner Scott in this bullpen with Edwin Diaz at the back end, I mean, who closes? I don't know. But at the same time, having Tanner Scott in that bullpen as a left-hander too, that's what the Mets need. They need a lights-out lefty. They've needed a lights-out lefty really since the last lights-out lefty that the Mets had in their bullpen was probably Billy Wagner. So, I mean, Tanner Scott, I think going to the Mets makes perfect sense for the Mets. I'm not sure if it makes perfect sense for Tanner Scott, but, I mean, you have that back end of the bullpen. You're going to need a strong bullpen in the playoffs. You're going to need a strong bullpen in the playoffs. We know that. I mean, the Dodgers had one of the strongest bullpens in the league. They had bullpen games in the playoffs. So, I'm not saying Tanner Scott or Edwin Diaz is going to open a game, but, having those guys in the back end of your bullpen, that's one of the best back ends in baseball right there. So, Yankees, I mean, their bullpen's already loaded. We're going to get into that later, especially Devin Williams. I think a lot of people are sleeping on that Devin Williams trade. Arguably the best closer in baseball. So we're going to get into that a little bit. But Tanner Scott going to the Mets, he's going to be the guy that sets the market for these relief pitchers. I think the Mets need to go out there and get him. Maybe it's only on a 2-year, 3-year deal. I think it makes perfect sense. I'd even go 4. I mean, the guy right now, he is 30 years old. He'll be turning 31 next year in July. So you get him till he's 34. Sign me up for it. Give him a 2-3-year deal. Maybe a 2-year deal with high AAV. I think that's what David Stearns is kind of using Steve Cohen's money. Like the combination of those two, I think it's very intriguing because, Stearns doesn't like to – what I've learned about Stearns so far is he doesn't really like to commit to players north of 30 years old. But at the same time, if you can get a really good player north of 30 years old and you offer him a lot of high salary and high annual higher AAV, that's where the Mets come into play for a lot of veterans. Like, hey, we won't sign you to a 6-7 year deal, but we'll give you a lot of money each year. I mean, we just saw that with the offer that they gave Pete Alonso. I mean, $30 million a year to Pete Alonso sounds insane, but if it's over 3 years, I think a lot of Mets fans would sign up for it. So, Tanner Scott, he's going to set the market for these relief pitchers. Mets have a need for relief pitchers. I mean, right now, really only 2 competent guys you have in that bullpen. Edwin Diaz and Jose Budo. That's about it. So they really need bullpen arms. Happy New Year, Jonathan. Happy New Year to all you guys. But yeah, next topic for the Mets. They do need a DH, but let's do a quick Pete Alonso update. Came out yesterday that he's looking for a 9-year deal, similar to a deal that Prince Fielder got. How'd that Prince Fielder deal work out? Not very good. So he's not getting a 9-year deal. He's not. I think that's just Scott Boras just leaking something out to really push everybody's buttons. Hey, he's looking for a 9-year deal. We're not signing for cheap. I think the Mets are they have the advantage right now in these Pete Alonso sweepstakes. We've seen first baseman fly off the board, and he's really the only one left. So he's running out of options. I could see the San Francisco Giants swooping in. I could see the Los Angeles Angels being stupid and swooping in. But, Pete Alonso, David Wright was even talking about it on his press conference today after he got inducted into the Mets Hall of Fame. So shout out to him. He well-deserved for David Wright. May not be a Hall of Famer, but he is a Mets Hall of Famer. Pete Alonso could really have a special career if he stays with the Mets. Because he goes anywhere else. He goes to the LA Angels. Everybody's going to forget about him. He's just going to be the guy who hits a lot of home runs. He stays with the Mets. He has the potential to break the home run record this season. This season, he could enrich himself as a Mets Hall of Famer. He does that, his number gets retired. So, and if he wins with the Mets, even though he'd probably be the 4th best player on the Mets, probably, if they did win a World Series within these next few years. I mean, you got Lindor, you got Soto, Edwin Diaz, Kodai Senga, Manea. Like Pete Alonso a few years ago, yes, he was the best player on the Mets. But if he re-signs with the Mets and they do win a World Series, no one will care that he's not the best player on the Mets because he went through the thick and the thin. He went through all of it. He lost with us. He won with us a little bit last year. Got a good taste of it. Like, if he wants to be remembered, which is kind of corny of me to say, but stay with the Mets. Stay with the Mets. I think Pete Alonso is going to get a 3-4 year deal with an opt-out after 1 or 2 years. I think the best bet for Pete Alonso would take a player opt-out after 1 year. So then you can kind of reset his market, because if he goes off this year and he has an opt-out at the end of the year, he's going to opt out. It's just obvious. I mean, we saw it with Sean Manea. He took advantage of that opt-out. He got paid. So, Pete Alonso, I think he's a great fit with the Mets, because, I mean, they were 2 wins away from the World Series without Juan Soto. So if you bring back basically the same lineup with Juan Soto, all they have to do is win 2 more games with Juan Soto during the World Series. I'm not saying that's going to happen this year, but I mean, you're talking a lineup of Lindor, Soto, Vientos, Alonso, maybe Nimmo and Alonso, depending on the righty-lefty matchup. But let's say they're facing a lefty. It'll be Lindor, Soto, Vientos, Alonso, Nimmo, a healthy Francisco Alvarez, Jeff McNeil. Say what you want about him. He had the 2nd highest OPS on the team after the All-Star break, only after Francisco Lindor. Above and probably the best stretch of Jeff McNeil's career was after the All-Star break. So say what you want about him. I love Luis-Angel Acuna, but the best player now plays. And Jeff McNeil, I think, is the best second baseman on the Mets right now. I'm not saying Acuna's never going to be good, but at the same time, Jeff McNeil, former batting title, former All-Star, coming off the best stretch of his career after the All-Star break, McNeil needs to be the second baseman for the Mets on opening day. No doubt about it, he will. No doubt about it, he should. So, Let's get back to that lineup. Lindor, Soto, Vientos, Alonso, Nimmo, McNeil, Alvarez, maybe platoons. Find somebody to platoon. I hope Jesse Winker, but platoon with Starlin Marte at the DH spot. Got Tyrone Taylor and Jose Siri both in center field to make up for the defense of Juan Soto in right field. I like that option. You need some defense out there. Jose Siri's got some pop. Tyrone Taylor's got serious speed. So does Jose Siri. Sign me up for it. Sign me up for that lineup, man. I'll take that lineup every single day. That's what I would do. You got to get Pete Alonso. The Mets need Pete Alonso. And Pete Alonso needs the Mets. Quite simple. They're a match made in heaven. And I know they want to wait for Vladdy. I get it. Well, a lot of, not they, but Mets fans want the Mets to wait for Vladdy. But they're in the win now mode. Everyone's talking about Soto. He's only 26. They have a championship window. Dude, Francisco Lindor is on the north side of 32. Just like I'm going to talk about Aaron Judge. He's not getting any younger. Francisco Lindor's not getting any younger. Francisco Lindor just had the best year of his career last year. They need to capitalize in 2025, not because Juan Soto, but because they have Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto. I don't want Lindor being at the tail end of his career and the Mets start winning and going after guys. We have one of the best shortstops in baseball right now. They need to go all out for 2025. You can't just wait for Vladdy. I mean, you could. Don't get me wrong. But they could always re-sign Pete Alonso, and then they could get another potential superstar in Kyle Tucker. Then you'd probably have to shift, Nimmo back to center. But if you have an outfield of Kyle Tucker, Brandon Nimmo, Juan Soto, then your infield is Pete Alonso, Jeff McNeil or Luis Angel Acuna, maybe Ronnie Mauricio, one of those three guys. Lindor at short, Vientos at third. Francisco Alvarez, if he can actually hit. I mean, that's a very, very good lineup. That's a super team right there. So, Mets, my wish list for the Mets is Alonso, Winker, and Sasaki. And Tanner Scott, obviously, too. I would love Tanner Scott in this bullpen. And bring back Ryan Stanek. So I'd make 5 more moves. Obviously, Roki's the wild card, but I think 4 out of those 5 moves the Mets need to make. Sign Tanner Scott. Sign Jesse Winker. Sign Pete Alonso. They got a good ball club right there. Then you wait for Kyle Tucker. Don't wait for Vladdy. Wait for Kyle Tucker. That's what I want the Mets to do. That's what I think they should do. Let's get into the DH. Anthony Santander is probably the best DH option. Switch hitting 40 home run hitter. I mean, that's hard to come by. I get it. His on-base percentage isn't great. His batting average isn't great. But when you're a DH, what do you want out of your DH? Home runs. And Santander can do that from both sides of the plate. He would probably be the most intriguing option. And I think, based off what they offered Teoscar Hernandez, they offered him a 2-year deal. Why wouldn't they offer Santander something? Why not? Then again, they get Pete. They have a little bit more flexibility. Then they can go, if they get Santander, I'm okay with no Pete. I'm not thrilled, but I'm okay with no Pete. But if they get Pete, Santander can kick rocks and go to another team. Because then we can bring back Jesse Winker, and you platoon Jesse Winker, who kills right-handers, struggled with the Mets when he first got there, lit it up in the postseason. And throughout his whole entire career, he has above 300 batting average against right-handed pitchers, above an 800 OPS. And with runners in scoring position, same thing, above a 300 batting average, above an 800 OPS. So this guy kills right-handers. He kills with runners in scoring position. He's kind of the guy you don't want to play against. You hate him if you're playing against him, but you love him if you're playing with him. I would love to have Winker in this lineup. I mean, him and Lindor were great buddies. Him and Alonso were great buddies. I'm not going to say he changed the Mets' attitude, but he kind of did. They kind of had that chip on their shoulder when they got Winker, It was like they were just saying, F you don't think we're this good? We'll show you we're that good. So I would sign up for Alonso, Winker, Tanner Scott, Ryan Stanek. And then if we miss out on the Roki Sasaki sweepstakes, why not bring back Jose Quintana? Jose Quintana didn't allow a single run in the wild card round, didn't allow a single run in the divisional round. Got beat up by the Dodgers, but I mean, everybody gets beat up by the Dodgers sometimes. It just happens. But Jose Quintana, I think, is a guy that, the Mets kind of could take advantage of. Sign him for another 1-2 year deal. I would probably say 1 year deal. I wouldn't want a guy at his age for 2-3 years, but I think they can get him on a 1 year deal. Then the other guy that they can bring back for the 2025 Mets from the 2024 Mets, Jose Iglesias. I think it makes all the sense in the world. I'm not saying he's going to be our starting second baseman again, but I mean, after McNeil went down, I mean, he was a beast. He was a beast for us. Hit over 300, a little bit over 80 games, I believe. But even if you're not going to play him, having him on the bench is great. Not only because he's a good bench piece, just baseball-wise, but he's a veteran that you want in that clubhouse. He's a mentor to those young guys like Mark Vientos, like Francisco Alvarez, hopefully Ronnie Mauricio, Luis Acuna, maybe even Drew Gilbert at some point. I think we might see Drew Gilbert at some point, especially since we have Tyrone Taylor and Jose Siri. I think that's what the Mets are hoping for. Get a little bit out of those two guys. And then when Drew is ready, you call him up, have him play center. I think that's what the Mets are kind of thinking, kind of like, and if it's not Gilbert, maybe it's Jet. If it's not Jet, maybe it's Acuna. Everybody thinks Acuna can't play the outfield. Oh, he's a second baseman only. No, he's not. He's the best athlete in the Mets' entire organization. He's an athlete. He can play short. He can play second. I think he could play third. If you gave him the third base, if you told him, hey, go play third base, he could figure it out. And same thing in the outfield. He could figure it out. I want Acuna on the big league ball club. I get it. You want to get him at bats. You can make the case that he get more at bats in the minors, but at the same time, I mean, he was on the playoff roster for a reason because he's a very good player. He's a very good athlete. So, but yep, that'll wrap it up for the Mets. Let's get into some Yankees talk. Yankees, I mean, they need another there's a hole in the infield. I don't think any Yankee fan wants to go into 2025 with DJ LeMahieu as their second baseman. Quite frankly, I don't think they should either. He's 36 years old now. He's at the tail end of his career. He barely played last year, had 3 separate injuries last year. I mean, I could say you can go the DJ LeMahieu route for the first half of the season, get a second baseman that's tearing the cover off the ball at the deadline. But I think it makes perfect sense for Luis Arraez, and I'm not a big fan of Luis Arraez. I mean, yeah, everybody's been calling him a one-tool player, and that's exactly what he is. But he does that one tool better than anybody. Let's take a look at Luis Arraez's numbers. Last year, first off, let's just say this: 3-time batting champ. Last year he hit .314, career .323 hitter, 3-time All-Star, 3 consecutive batting titles. He's been on a lot of teams, played with Minnesota, played with Miami, played with San Diego. A 1 WAR last year. That's not appealing, but I think if there's a perfect fit for Arraez, I think it's with the Yankees. And here's why. If you have him leading off right before Judge, I mean, this is a guy with a .318 batting average, .323 career batting average. Say what you want about his on-base percentage, but a .346 on-base percentage is good. That's a good on-base percentage. Career .372 on-base percentage. OPS career-wise, .790. Doesn't have pop, but at the same time, and he doesn't walk a lot either. I mean, he only had 24 walks last year. Through 6-year career, he's only got 196 walks. But he just hits the ball very well. And if you have a slap hitter at the top of your lineup with the Yankees, and then you have Aaron Judge to follow, I mean, what are the opposing teams going to do when Luis Arraez gets a single to lead off the game? You're going to have to pitch to Aaron Judge and try to get him out, because if you walk Aaron Judge, and he had more walks last year than Juan Soto, you walk Aaron Judge, and then you got Cody Bellinger coming up with 2 runners on with no outs. So, yes, Arraez doesn't do a lot of great things, but he does one great thing. That's hit for average. So you have that guy get on base. Like I just said, walk Aaron Judge. We dare you. That's what the Yankees will be saying. We dare you to walk Aaron Judge, because we got Bellinger, we got Stanton, we got Paul Goldschmidt, who's 2 years removed from an NL MVP. And he's saying he's still got something left in the tank. And I don't think I think the best years of Paul Goldschmidt are behind him. But when Goldschmidt comes up with runners on base, I think he's going to find a way to get the job done 30% of the time. That's what he does. And then you still got Austin Wells in this lineup. You still got Jazz Chisholm Jr. in this lineup. So right now, the Yankees lineup doesn't look as great as it did last year. You could say, there's a lot of people saying, oh my God, we turned Juan Soto into Paul Goldschmidt and Cody Bellinger. Come on, give me a break. But if you turn Juan Soto into Luis Arraez, Paul Goldschmidt, and Cody Bellinger, then you're getting there. I think a lot of people are forgetting how good Juan Soto was with the Yankees. They are. But, Stan's got the injury concerns, obviously, too. But, you get 130-plus games out of Stanton. That's good. That's what you want. But Luis Arraez at the top of the Yankees order makes perfect freaking sense. Like I said, he gets on base with a single. We dare you to walk Aaron Judge and let Cody Bellinger come up. And it depends what Cody Bellinger you get this year. If you get the 2024 version, that's subpar for sure. But if you get the 2023 version of Cody Bellinger, that guy comes up with 2 runners on, no outs. I believe, I'm not going to say definitively, but I think Cody Bellinger will have a good year with the Yankees. He's got the short porch out in right field. Power lefty. Arraez makes perfect sense. If I'm the Yankees, I go Luis Arraez. He's definitely, he's like Gleyber Torres last year, terrible defender. So was Luis Arraez. But Gleyber didn't have any pop last year. It's an upgrade. I think that's the perfect sense. I'm not a huge fan of Jazz Chisholm Jr. being the everyday third baseman. He didn't look like a natural third baseman last year, but at the same time, just like I said, Acuna's an athlete. Jazz is an athlete as well. He can play multiple positions. He played center. He played short. He played third with the Yankees. He played second with the Miami Marlins. And I think Jazz would figure it out across a 162-game season. He basically already did figure it out in the second half of last year. I'm not going to say he was the best defensive third baseman in the league, but I think if, over the offseason, he's probably working on it. In spring training, he'd be working on it. He'll figure it out. Luis Arraez to the Yankees just makes perfect sense. And Marcus Stroman, they're putting him on the trade block right now. Padres need pitching. Padres not specifically even pitching, but they need innings. They need someone to eat up innings in that back end of the rotation. Let's take a look at the Padres rotation right now. Padres depth chart. Let's see. So right now, they got Joe Musgrove, Yu Darvish, and Michael King. But their 4 and 5 are Randy Vasquez and Joni Brito. You need innings. I would put Marcus Stroman and a prospect in for 1 year of Luis Arraez. Put him at the top of the order with Aaron Judge. Like I said before, Arraez gets on base. Judge can't walk him. You don't want Belly coming up with runners on. I think Luis Arraez would be great with the Yankees. I think he would have the best year of his career with the Yankees. Maybe a little Yankees magic. We see Yankees magic happen all the time. Darryl Strawberry, great Met. One of the best Mets, if not the best Met of all time. Arguably, I'd say Tom Seaver edges him a little bit. Then I'd go Mike Piazza. But Darryl Strawberry is definitely a top 3 Met. And he was at the tail end of his career. And then he had that Yankee magic. He had the Yankee magical season. So maybe get a little Yankee magic out of him. But man, Padres need a back end starter. Yankees need a leadoff hitter and a second baseman. Swap. Add a prospect in. Swap. I don't even think they need to add in a prospect like Spencer Jones. Let's take a look at the Yankees prospects. Let's pick one prospect that a top 10 prospect. Let's pick a top 10 prospect. We'll be nice to the Padres. Dominguez, no, he's the number 1 prospect. He's going to be the everyday left fielder at the start of the season. We're leaving out Spencer Jones. I think if you include Marcus Stroman, there's no need for the Padres to ask for a guy like Spencer Jones. But you could throw in a pitcher because they do need young pitching. They need back end pitching. But what I would say, maybe throw in like a Bryce Cunningham. 22 years old.
Good pitcher for the Yankees in the Yankee system. He just got drafted, actually. You could throw in Cade Smith, who's the number 13th ranked prospect for the Yankees, right-handed pitcher. He's got, in 2024, he put up a 3.65 ERA in 19 starts, 21 games overall. You could throw in a guy like maybe... Ooh, this is a good one. And he's ready to play, I would say, at the MLB level this year. I'm probably going to butcher this name. 23 years old, Jorbit Vivas. He can play second. He can play third. A little utility player out there. Since 2018 in the minors, a 780 OPS, an average of 271, on base percentage of 377. This past year, he drove in 50 runs in 2024, 50 RBIs, only 9 home runs. But, also Aaron Judge wasn't a great minor league player either. I don't think anybody in the minors saw Aaron Judge hitting 60-plus homers, 50-plus homers. But, I'm not saying Vivas is going to turn into Aaron Judge, but you could throw him in that trade and then throw Marcus Stroman in that trade. $18 million off the books with Marcus Stroman, $14 million in with Luis Arraez. You save $4 million. Maybe you can even get rid of blanking, the guy who killed the Mets when he was on the Padres. What's his name? Not ringing a bell right now. I don't know why. But, Yankees, they need that leadoff hitter. Padres need back-end pitching. Stroman's on the block. Arraez is on the block. Throwing one prospect, I think it gets the job done. And now let's talk about the Yankees overall in 2025, because they made a lot of moves this offseason. The biggest move I think they made, everybody's talking about the offense. Paul Goldschmidt coming in, former MVP. Cody Bellinger coming in, former MVP. I think their best days are behind him. I think you can get something out of Cody Bellinger, though. Paul Goldschmidt, it really depends. If he has a year like he did 2 years ago where he won the NL MVP, obviously, that's 2 MVPs in your lineup with Judge and Paul Goldschmidt. But I don't think they're going to get that Paul Goldschmidt. But if I had to predict, I'd say Paul Goldschmidt has 24-plus homers. Last year we had 23. I'd say 24, 25 homers. OPS above 780. Batting average above 270, 260. That's a good year out of Paul Goldschmidt. Cody Bellinger, I think what you're expecting out of him is, I'm going to bump up the homer number for him. I think he had 22 last year. But since he's playing in the short porch as a left-hander, I think, we can bump those home run numbers up to 26, 27 plus. I think that's what you want out of Bellinger. A batting average. Just 2 years ago, he hit above 300. I'm not saying he's going to hit above 300, but he's also going to be in the lineup with Aaron Judge. So we got to factor that in. He's never had a guy like, yes, you could say he kind of was the guy with the LA Dodgers. He was the MVP, but he's never really had a guy like Aaron Judge in the middle of the lineup with him. So I think we could see a little bit of a better year even than he had 2 years ago with the Cubs out of Cody Bellinger. So I'll say 26, 27 home runs for Cody Bellinger is a good year. OPS well above 800. I think he's going to get, I'd say a batting average of 270, 280 plus. That's a really good year to Cody Bellinger. And Aaron Judge, obviously, he's going to hit 40 plus, 50 plus homers, driving over 110 RBIs. He's going to hit above 300. That's just Aaron Judge. But Aaron Judge ain't getting any younger. They need to win now. I've said that on multiple pods, so I'm not going to go all out on that. But I do like their offense, because we're also not even talking about Jazz Chisholm Jr. We're also not even talking about Austin Wells, who's probably one of the best young catchers in the game. Let's take a look at Austin Wells' numbers. Last year, 13 home runs, 55 RBIs. He kind of struggled in the second half, struggled in the playoffs. But, the batting average obviously needs to come up, but he's a great defensive catcher. And when you're a great defender and you have an on-base percentage of 322, that's intriguing. So I think we can see a little bit more out of Austin Wells in a full year now, too. I do like the idea of Austin Wells taking a step forward. And then even Jazz Chisholm Jr., you look at his numbers, and he's only 26. Career 249 hitter. But last year with the Yankees, when he really turned it on, probably had the best stretch of his career with the Yankees. In 46 games, he had 273, 825 OPS, 11 home runs, and 23 RBIs, 18 stolen bases. Altogether in 2024, he had 40 stolen bases, 73 RBIs, 144 hits in 147 games, and he hit 256. So we're forgetting about Jazz. I feel like a lot of people are forgetting about Jazz. But, they got a good lineup. And the American League isn't as dominant as the National League. The National League, you got studs. Ohtani, Betts, Freddie Freeman, Teoscar Hernandez on the LA Dodgers. You go to the Philadelphia Phillies, you got Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, Like you just got guys all over the place. And then even the Braves. I mean, Ronald Acuna Jr. is coming back, and we all know what he can do, former MVP. Matt Olson had a down year last year, but I expect him to be right back in the mix as one of the best power hitters, best first baseman in the game. He is that good. And then now the Mets, Juan Soto, Francisco Lindor, Mark Vientos. Like the National League is stacked, whereas the American League, not so much. So I think they can get away with a lineup like they are constructing. But if they get Luis Arraez in that lineup, leading off, and you got Judge to follow, Bellinger to follow, Jazz to follow, Wells to follow. I just left out Stanton. You got Stanton to follow, Paul Goldschmidt to follow. That's a very good lineup. And then Jason Dominguez, I mean, if he turns into the player that the Yankees really do think he is, that's another plus. So even though they lost Juan Soto, and I think it's going to show that, losing Juan Soto sucks, at the same time, they're in the American League, and they still have one of the best lineups in the American League, especially if they get Arraez. Because like I said, Arraez on a ton of teams. Let's say Arraez is on the Mets. Okay. Jeff McNeil's a better defender, and Jeff McNeil's not even a great defender. Jeff McNeil has more pop, and Jeff McNeil can also hit for average. He goes to a team like the Dodgers. Not a fit. He goes to a team like the Phillies. Not a fit. But with the Yankees, with the slugging Bronx Bombers, he's a perfect fit. He is a perfect fit. One-tool player for sure. Doesn't have a lot of pop. Terrible defender. Terrible base runner. But he is a great single hitter. And if he gets on base with a single, and you got Judge following up, good luck walking him and getting Bellinger up with 2 runners on with no outs. Good luck, opposing pitchers. I think they will end up with Luis Arraez, and I think if they do, the Yankees will undoubtedly have the best lineup in the American League. And that's even with the Toronto Blue Jays, who I think Bo Bichette's going to heat up. I think Bo Bichette's going to have a great year, especially after the year he had last year. He's probably, I would say, when he's at his best, he's a top 5 shortstop in all of MLB. Obviously, Vladdy, he's a stud as well. Orioles, obviously, Gunnar Henderson. But let's flip from baseball to football. Football, man. The season is over. No more miserable Sundays for us Jet and Giant fans. I hope Garrett Wilson stays, and my bold prediction is Garrett Wilson does stay. And my other bold prediction is Aaron Rodgers does stay, and I think the Jets need Aaron Rodgers more than a lot of people think. And here is why. Aaron Rodgers won, 3,800. Let's go to the exact numbers. 3,897 passing yards, 28 passing touchdowns, finished top 8 in both those categories this year in the NFL. The defense took a major step back. The defense was the best defense in the league. Best defense in the entire league in 2023. They were ranked 21st in points allowed this year. 21st. They went from the best defense to a below average defense. Jermaine Johnson getting a torn Achilles in week 3 played a role in that. Sauce Gardner struggling early on played a role in that. But I mean, if those two things don't happen, I saw a stat today. You flip the 1-score games. Jets are actually 9-8 this year. And they lost a lot of 1-score games. A lot of games that were due to early on in the year when Greg Zuerlein, just plunked field goal after field goal after field goal. The Jets really should have been probably 4-2 to start the entire year if Greg Zuerlein doesn't miss those kicks. And if the Jets are 4-2 rather than 2-4, 2-5, come on. They would have had the momentum. Maybe they still get Devontae, And that's another thing. The Jets got Devontae Adams coming back. Well, hopefully coming back. It really depends on what Aaron Rodgers does. If Aaron Rodgers retires, I could see Devontae staying. But if Rodgers doesn't retire and leaves the Jets, I could see Devontae just going wherever Rodgers goes, because it seems like they are a package deal. Also, you got to factor in, this is the reason I want the Jets to keep Rodgers. I don't think the defense will be as bad as it was with Jermaine Johnson coming back. Will McDonald's had 12 sacks. Quentin Williams a beast. Sauce Gardner, I mean, say what you want at the beginning of the year. He really turned around in the second half. He's just because his interception numbers aren't up, it doesn't mean he's bad. That's what I hate. Oh, Sauce never gets picked. Sauce only had 1 interception this year in garbage time. Sauce Gardner, just because you're a cornerback doesn't mean you need 5 interceptions a year. You don't. You just don't. That's not what makes a good cornerback is interceptions. I mean, we saw Diggs with the Cowboys get interception after interception after interception in his first year in the league, and he got cooked all the time. That's what I also think Sauce was doing. I mean, we saw Sauce jumping for interceptions. He was kind of interception happy in the beginning of the year. And then he laid off. He let it come to him. So DJ Reed won't be back, but, Brandon Eccles, maybe he takes a step up. He's still a good player in this league. And then maybe you get another guy in the draft. Maybe you get another guy in free agency. I think the Jets can kind of replace DJ Reed, even though he is a good cornerback. But they still got CJ Mosley. They still got Sauce Gardner, Quentin Williams, Will McDonald, Jermaine Johnson's going to return. I like the talent on the defense. I also love the talent on the offense. I love it. Devontae Adams, 1,000-yard receiver. Garrett Wilson was a 1,000-yard receiver. Breece Hall had 1,000 yards last year, 900 rushing yards this year. I believe a little over 1,400 scrimmage yards this year because he can catch the ball as well out of the backfield. Braylon Allen, he's a young stud. Their offensive line, I mean, Joe Tippmann, center, played in every single offensive snap this year. Olu Fashanu, he showed us a lot this year in his first year in the league. Yes, he went down with an injury against the Rams, but he'll be back. Elijah Vera Tucker will be back. That's 3 very good offensive linemen. We still got Simpson under contract as well. Roll the dice with Rodgers one more time. That's what I would do if I'm the Jets. I just don't. When's the next time we're going to see a Jet quarterback finish top 8 in both passing touchdowns and passing yards? And this team is too good just to tear apart. Sauce is due for a new deal. Garrett Wilson will be due for a new deal. Breece Hall will be due for a new deal soon. Same thing with Jermaine Johnson. Like, we cannot just rebuild. And I don't think Jet fans want to sign up for another rookie quarterback, first-time head coach, and just let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can build, because the Jets we don't want to see that. It's been way too long. I don't even think Jet fans care about a Super Bowl, and I think they can still build long-term success with Rodgers. I really do. Because then you get Garrett locked up. You get Breece locked up. You get Sauce locked up. Those are the 3 guys. Jermaine Johnson, lock him up. And then you can draft a young quarterback, because Rodgers already said he's willing to take a pay cut and restructure his contract. Said that on the McAfee show a few weeks ago. He's willing to restructure his contract. And, I think he wants to play. I don't think he wants to end his career on this note. So I think what the Jets are doing, they haven't come out and say that they want Rodgers back. They haven't come out and say that they don't. And I think the reason why is they're leaving it up to the head coach that they hire. The only thing I'm scared of is I think the owner, Woody Johnson, doesn't want Rodgers back. And there's one head coaching candidate who I'm 50-50 on. I think a lot of Jet fans are 50-50 on this guy I'm about to mention. ESPN analyst, former Jets head coach Rex Ryan. Rex Ryan hasn't had a lot of nice things to say about Aaron Rodgers during his time at ESPN. And if Woody doesn't want Rodgers, and let's say a guy like Mike Vrabel does want Rodgers, even though it came out that he potentially is using them, or let's say a guy like Brian Flores wants Rodgers, or a guy like even first-time head coach that we're interviewing, Josh McCown. What if they want Rodgers? And then Woody says, no, I want a coach that doesn't want Rodgers. And then he just goes with Rex Ryan. I don't want Rex Ryan with a young QB. Now, if Rex wants Rodgers, surprisingly, I'd be okay with that. I'd be okay with a Rex Ryan and Rodgers pairing. Sounds crazy, but you know what? Why not? Why not? But Rex, I mean, if he doesn't figure it out in 1 year with Rodgers, he's gone. He's gone. I think he would be the short-term, not long-term coach. He did inherit a very good team after he took over Eric Mangini. He would be taking over a very talented team again. He won with that talented Eric Mangini built team. if he can build with this Joe Douglas build team, maybe Rex Ryan has the magic that he did in his first 2 years as the Jets head coach. I mean, after all, last time the Jets were in the playoffs, who was the head coach? It was Rex Ryan. Rex Ryan, he's not number one on my list. I think Mike Vrabel is number one on my list. Let's take a look at all the head coach interviews that they have lined up. Right now, they met with Mike Vrabel. They met with Ron Rivera. They just completed an interview today with Matt Nagy. Just completing the head coach with Big AJ. That's funny. Right now, Adam Schefter, as of Monday, Mike Vrabel, Ron Rivera interviewed, Rex Ryan interviewed. They're going to interview Brian Flores, who I'd probably put at the top of my list. I want Brian Flores more than I want anybody. I want somebody who's going to come in here strictly business. Brian Flores, Tua didn't like him because he was mean. Give it a break. It's the NFL. Bill Belichick was mean. Tom Brady was mean. And what do they have? A lot of rings. I'm not saying Brian Flores is going to win as many rings as Bill Belichick, but just because he's mean. And look at what the Vikings defense is doing this year. They're 14-3. But Flores, McCown, Joe Brady's going to get interviewed. Matt Nagy just got interviewed. Arthur Smith, Steelers offensive coordinator. I'm not big on him. Brian Grease, Aaron Glenn, who I do like the idea of Aaron Glenn. Vance Joseph, and Bobby Slowick. So I'd say number one on my list, Brian Flores. Number two on my list, but probably unrealistic, is Mike Vrabel. So I'm going to take out the unrealistic guys of Mike Vrabel, Ron Rivera, and I'll even take Rex Ryan out because I think those three are wild cards. Ron Rivera, I don't think we're going to hire at all. I don't want him. Rex Ryan, 50-50 on. That's a wild card. Pushing him to the side. Mike Vrabel, unrealistic, kind of using us, pushing him to the side. Brian Flores is my number one option. Undoubtedly, head coaching experience for the Dolphins. Strictly business out of him. I think he can help this defense that has talent. I want Brian Flores as my head coach next year. Josh McCown's my number two. And the reason why Josh McCown's my number two is because he's a smart man. He's a smart man. Right now, he's the QB coach for Sam Darnold in Minnesota. And Kevin O'Connell is obviously a great head coach. Picking his brain all year in Minnesota. He turned around Sam Darnold's career with Kevin O'Connell, obviously. I'm not a big guy on first-time head coaches, but these two that I'm naming, Josh McCown and then Aaron Glenn's my number three. Josh McCown, my number two, because even though he's a first-time head coach, he has a great offensive mind. He's been in the league. He's been with a lot of teams. He's been with a lot of offensive systems. I like the idea of Josh McCown. So why not roll the dice with Josh McCown if you can't get Brian Flores? I don't want Joe Brady. I don't want Matt Nagy. I don't want Arthur Smith. Those three guys can go kick rocks, but the Jets are really interviewing almost anybody, which is what they need to do. Aaron Glenn, I like the idea of Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn is actually a former Jet stud that strictly meant business. Right now, he's with the Detroit Lions as a defensive coordinator. And just let's take a look at the Lions defense. A Lions defense that shut out a top 5 offense in the Minnesota Vikings in Week 17 to become the number 1 seed. I love the idea of hiring Aaron Glenn. But you look at their defensive numbers this year. I mean, rushing yards, which is where the Jets really, really struggled this year, was rushing yards. They could not stop the run. They were 5th in rushing yards. Detroit Lions were 7th in points allowed. Third down percentage, 1st. They don't give up first downs on third downs. That's huge. That's the name of the game. You win on third down in the NFL. And I'm not saying I'm an NFL freaking guru, but it's common sense. Third down comes up on the defensive side. If you stop them, they're not scoring a touchdown. If you're on third down on the offense and you get a first down, it keeps the drive alive, keeps points on the board. Third down is where the game is won and lost. And there's no better team at stopping first downs on third down this year than the Detroit Lions. I love the idea of Aaron Glenn. former Jet. And speaking of former Jet, I mean, Josh McCown or Aaron Glenn. That's wild that I'm saying those two. Glenn played 8 years with the Jets. 8 years with the Jets. And this is a guy who I think could really make Sauce Gardner into something. I mean, he had 4 interceptions in 1996, 6 interceptions in 1998. Like, he had a really good career with the Jets, dude. So I like the idea of Aaron Glenn as well. So those are my top 3 options for the Jets. GM-wise, a little different. This might sound crazy, but I'm okay with Louis Riddick. I'm okay. I'm okay with that. I'm not like a huge fan based off his comments towards Jet fans, but at the same time, I mean, we're Jet fans. We admitted ourselves, our team sucks, dude. Our team sucks. We're really going to not hire a guy who could potentially be a great GM just because he thinks the Jets suck? Do you want a general manager coming in here and thinking the Jets are good? No. You want a GM coming in here and saying, all right, this team sucks. We need to fix it. And that's what I think Louis Riddick could do. So, sign me up for Louis Riddick. Let's take a look at the other guys that are interviewing for the Jets GM role. Jets GM interviews. So they're going to also interview Chris Stapleton or Chris Spielman, who is the current executive assistant for Detroit. They're really looking at Lions, huh? Mike Greenberg also getting an opportunity. He's with the Bucs right now. Not the Mike Greenberg from ESPN, by the way. And the Bucs have built something. I mean, the Bucs, former Super Bowl champions. 3 hours ago, Rich Cimini's tweeted out they interviewed Chiefs assistant GM Mike Barganzi. That would be a fun name to play with, Mike Barganzi. This is a quote from Rich Cimini. 16 seasons in the Kansas City organization, played at Brown University, Massachusetts native. Skinny, one of the hot names, has been around a lot of winning 3 Super Bowl rings. Brett Veach's right-hand man since 2021. Started as a low-level assistant under GM Scott Paoli. No previous GM experience. Has been with only one organization, also linked to Titans opening. So I'd be okay with him. I'd be okay with really, I'm okay with anybody. Because I'm going to be honest with you. GM is hard to grade. As a first-time GM, it's really hard to grade. I mean, then again, Joe Douglas, former Super Bowl champion with the Ravens. He drafted a lot of great guys, but he just messed up on one pick and the most important pick, which was Zach Wilson. So that's what I think the end of Joe Douglas was there. And he also wanted to trade for Jerry Jeudy, and his Madden rating was too low. So Woody Johnson didn't like that. But, man, the Jets just got to find the right head coach. That's what I think is most important, more important than the GM. But my next topic, I kind of talked about it a little bit. Can the Jets get to the playoffs if they keep Aaron Rodgers? Yes, I think they could, but they got to find the right head coach. They got to find the right head coach with Rodgers. Because, I mean, Rodgers put up numbers. He's up there with Pat Mahomes. And Pat Mahomes, they only lost 2 games this year. And Pat Mahomes didn't play great. Coaching matters. Coaching freaking matters. Look at the Detroit Lions, Jared Goff. Look at Baker Mayfield on the Bucs. Look at Sam Darnold with the Vikings. Even Jordan Love with the Green Bay Packers. He's got Matt LaFleur. Look at the San Francisco 49ers with Brock Purdy. Coaching freaking matters. And the Jets had 2 defensive coordinators as their last 2 head coaches. 2. I'm not counting Todd Bowles in this. I'm talking Rob Saleh, who at first I was like, yes, we got him as our head coach. Love it. Didn't turn out too well. They should have fired him in the offseason last year, not in the middle of the season. I think they keep Robert Saleh. I think they could potentially get up there to 9 or 10 wins with Robert Saleh if they kept him. I really do. I don't think that would have been where they expected to be, but I think that he could have gotten them to the playoffs. I will say that. Jeff Ulbrich, on the other hand, no, he is not a good head coach whatsoever. The timeout management was awful. The defense took a major step back when he came in as head coach. No. So those were Aaron Rodgers' 2 head coaches during his Jets tenure. No.
That's just not going to work. When you have Jeff Ulbrich coaching your team, it's not going to work. Jeff Ulbrich was never going to take this team to the playoffs. I mean, when we look at Jeff Ulbrich, do we think he's ever going to be a head coach for a playoff team? No. Maybe one day, maybe he learned his lesson and he can become a great head coach in the league, but not this year. It was stupid of Woody Johnson to make him the interim head coach. It was stupid of Woody Johnson to fire Robert Saleh after 5 weeks. Woody Johnson sucks. And that's what I'll end on with the Jets. But if they can get the right head coach, I think they can make the playoffs if they keep Aaron Rodgers because of the talent that they have. I mean, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Braylon Allen, Olu Fashanu, Elijah Vera Tucker, Joe Tippmann. On the defensive side, you got Sauce, you got C.J. Mosley coming back, Quentin Williams, Jermaine Johnson coming off his injury, Will McDonald who had 12 sacks. I mean, this is a very talented roster. This is not a tank roster. This is not Chicago Bears. This is not a Tennessee Titans roster. This is not a New England Patriots roster. They have great players. Get the right head coach that can make those great players great. Let's talk about the draft before we wrap it up with the Jets, and then we'll get into the Giants draft. And they're keeping Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, if you haven't heard, probably heard. But right now, let's take a look at the official NFL draft order. I believe the Jets have number 10. I want to say that's what I have in my notes. Jets are picking at 7, actually. Even with Rodgers, I think they could still take a quarterback. I'd like Jalen Milroe. Maybe he can slip to 7. I think he will slip to. I think Jalen Milroe will slip to 7. Maybe even the second round. But I could see a cornerback. The one guy who I really do like, Malachi Starks of Georgia. We need a safety. We need to improve the secondary, especially with DJ Reed probably leaving. I like the idea of adding Malachi Starks in the draft. So that would be my number 1 option if we're not going quarterback. If we're going quarterback, I like the idea of Jalen Milroe. I've talked about it numerous times. You need an athletic quarterback in today's NFL. Pat Mahomes, athlete. Lamar Jackson, athlete. Josh Allen, athlete. Sam Darnold, having a great year. Athlete. Caleb Williams had a pretty good year this year. Athlete. Even though his team didn't have a great year, but he's an athlete. Jaden Daniels. Athlete. CJ Stroud had a great last year with Houston Texans, and he's in the playoffs again. Didn't have as great of a year as he did last year, but he's an athlete. Jalen Hurts. Athlete. Jalen Milroe. Athlete. With a cannon. So, yeah. Even Joe Milton with the Patriots, 6th-round pick last year. Look what he did this week. He's an athlete. You need an athletic quarterback in today's NFL. G-Men, I think they're really going to end up with Travis Hunter. As crazy as it sounds, everybody wants them to take a quarterback, obviously, because they desperately need one. But if they trade up, they will be drafting a quarterback. But if they sit at number 3, they will not mess up this pick. Because either Travis Hunter goes 1 or 2, probably 2, and then you end up with Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, or Shedeur and Cam Ward come off the board, and then you get the best player in the draft, who's Travis Hunter. And everybody's saying he can't play both. Why not? Everyone's saying, oh, well, the NFL is different than college. There's a lot more gruesome, bigger hits. Yes, that is true. But, I mean, I think he could be a red zone receiver. Here and there, he can get receptions for the Giants offense. And then the Giants need a cornerback. I mean, Deonte Banks sucks. He sucks. It was a wasted pick. You need a cornerback, and he's a lockdown corner. So, and you can also plug him in on the offensive side. I mean, he was a 1,000-yard receiver in college the past 2 seasons. Multiple interceptions. He's undoubtedly the best player in the draft, and if the Giants end up with him, they should be happy. But not too much on the Giants because the Giants are a little bit different than the Jets. Jets, they both suck. Don't get me wrong. But the Giants, they need a QB. It's going to be interesting what they do next year because if they do draft a QB, which I think they need to, that's why I think they should trade up because Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, if they suck again next year, they ain't coming back. But if they get a good quarterback and they develop that quarterback, they're going to stay no matter what their record is next year. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the offseason for the Giants. Because they suck, but they don't need a general manager and they don't need a head coach.
I think they have a really good head coach in Brian Daboll. I don't think they have a very good GM in Joe Schoen. I mean, outside of Malik Neighbors and Micah McFadden, his draft picks have sucked. They've sucked. Deontay Banks, Evan Neal, both bust. I mean, Tyrone Tracy is a great pick. I could say that. That's a good pick. But really, 3 good picks in 3 years. That's not too good. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. We'll hop on the Knicks real quick, and then we got to end this pod because it's getting late, 11 o'clock. Got to work tomorrow. I'm sure a lot of you do too. So you all have to go to bed when this podcast ends. The Knicks, 112-98 win over the Toronto Raptors. They improved their record to 25-13 after a 3-game losing streak. My bad. Lost to the Orlando Magic the other night. They lost to the Thunder in a gruesome loss when we were up going into the fourth quarter. We were actually up and lost that one 117-107. And then the Bulls loss was tough, especially since Karl-Anthony Towns dropped 44, but he came out of the game with an injury and then obviously missed that Magic game. But, I mean, it's a bump in the road. It's a bump in the road. You know, I'd rather have these bumps in the road now than late in the season or in the playoffs like they did last year. You know, iron out these bumps now, see what you need. Obviously, we all know what we need. We need depth. We need bench pieces, specifically another big man. I love Precious Achiuwa. Don't get me wrong. Jericho Sims, I don't love him. But, you know, they need another big man. They desperately need another big man, and they need probably another bench piece because Miles McBride is great. Don't get me wrong. I love Miles McBride. Deuce is my guy. But he needs help on that bench because right now it's Deuce, Campaign, and that's about it. That's about it for the Knicks right now. Precious Achiuwa isn't putting the ball in the basket. Jericho Sims isn't putting the ball in the basket. We saw Shamet actually get some minutes tonight, really for the first time in a long time. He played 21 minutes, 4 of 8 from shooting. But I think they also need to play Campaign more. I mean, Campaign only got 11 minutes tonight. He's only averaging 15.4 minutes per game. And in those 15.4 minutes per game, he's actually averaging just under 7 points per game, you know, shooting 40% from 3, shooting 42% from the field overall. Why is Campaign not getting more minutes? I don't know. I mean, I get it. Jalen Brunson's on this team. He's going to take up most of the point guard usage. And Josh Hart also, you know, you love him in that game. And he's a guy. Josh Hart's the only guy I'm okay with playing 40-plus minutes a game. And maybe McCall Bridges. But great game out of the Knicks tonight. Speaking of Josh Hart, another fantastic performance out of him. He's been the engine of this Knicks team. 21 points, 11 rebounds, 7 assists, 9 of 14 from the field, 2 of 5 from 3. OG Anunoby, another great game from OG, who's probably been the best trade acquisition outside of Karl-Anthony Towns and Carmelo Anthony in a long time for the Knicks. 27 points from him, 8 of 13 from the field, 4 of 6 from 3. And obviously the defense from him is outstanding. Karl-Anthony Towns, another double-double for him, 27 points, 13 rebounds in his return to the lineup. Jalen Brunson, 7 assists, 6 rebounds. A lot of rebounds for Jalen Brunson tonight. 13 points on 5 of 13 shooting. Brunson, he is kind of in a weird spot right now. I still think Brunson is kind of getting used to playing with this new roster. You know, we're all saying Bridges needed time. Cat obviously kind of clicked right away, but Brunson's still meshing. And I think in a few weeks, Brunson will really start to go off. McCall Bridges, a little cold tonight from the field, 4 of 18 shooting, but still 10 points. And the great defense, but he put up 11 threes and only made 2 of them. But McCall, I mean, he's averaging 18.6 points per game this year. I mean, he's everything we asked for. He's doing it. Shooting over 50% from the field. But they need bench pieces, man. I mean, you can't have your bench be Shamet, Precious Achiuwa, Campaign, Jericho Sims. Like, that's just not – it's not good. And we need Deuce back. He's out with a hamstring strain. Still unclear when he's officially going to come back in the lineup, but we could really use him because this bench sucks. They suck. They really do. But overall, Knicks are playing great. Top 10 scoring team. Pace has never been high for the Knicks these past few years, 26 in pace, but they're shooting 49.7% from the field as a team, which is second in the entire NBA. Their 3-point field goal percentage is third in the entire NBA with 37.9. Rebounds is really where we're struggling. Outside of Cat, nobody's really getting boards besides Josh Hart. 22nd in rebounds, and that's why we need that other big man. So, key for the Knicks, bump in the road, obviously, these last 4 games, but they cleaned it up tonight with a win over almost with a crappy Toronto Raptors team. Yeah, I mean, they needed to win tonight. You know, They really need to win tonight in the return home. And then obviously Friday, let's get our revenge against the Oklahoma City Thunder, one of the best teams, if not the best team in the league, who just took a loss to the best team in the league now, the Cleveland Cavaliers, who beat them 129-122. Only 4 losses the Cavs have this year. They are insane this year. Literally top 3 in almost every offensive category, 2nd in points per game, 6th in pace, field goal percentage, 1st, 3-point field goal percent, 3-point field goals, 16.3 a game team-wise, 3rd, 3-point field goal percentage, 1st in the league, 40.4. This team's insane. They're going to be hard to stop. Cavs, Celtics, Knicks, top 3 teams in the East. You want to get near them. You got to build that bench, man. You got look at the OKC. OKC has guys on their bench. Same thing with the Cavs. I mean, let's take a look at the game log tonight. I mean, the Cavs, they played 10 different guys. And then Max Strus coming off the bench for them, playing 26 minutes, dropping 17 points. Karis LeVert, another great option off them for the bench, who's averaging 11.4 points per game and 23 minutes of work. Isaac Okoro, another great piece off the bench. Georges Niang, another great piece off the bench. They have a great starting 5, obviously, with Mitchell, Darius Garland, Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, Dean Wade. But at the same time, what do they have? A bench. Knicks need a bench. But bump in the road. Figure it out. They figured it out tonight, but they need pieces. They need more pieces. All right, that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you for watching the James Nolan Podcast, whether on Facebook, X, or YouTube. I appreciate it. If you want to hop over to the YouTube page, links in the bio. Want to check out some fan-sided articles, you can go check them out. Probably going to be writing more a little bit tomorrow. Took a few days off with the writing, but we got to get back on it. So we'll get back on it. But my most recent articles is Pete Alonso. He needs to come back to the Mets. So that was the most recent one. Wrote one a few days ago about Aaron Rodgers, why he should come back to the Jets. The Roki Sasaki sweepstakes article is also up if you want to read a little bit more about that and why the Mets actually are a good fit, why the Mets really need Roki Sasaki, and why I think they could get Roki Sasaki, and the potential head coach and hire of Rex Ryan, why that could be a genius move or an absolute disaster. And the Yankees, another article about them a few days ago about a Brendan Donovan trade, which is unlikely, but also kind of likely. I'm kind of 50-50 on if they want to trade him. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. The Yankees need a second baseman. Luis Arraez is on the table. Marcus Stroman on the trade block. We got a lot to go over in a few more days as well. Hopefully Tanner Scott signs with the Mets. Hopefully Pete Alonso signs with the Mets. But to wrap it up, Knicks, that's the team we're worrying about right now. But baseball is coming, man. It's coming. And we'll talk about the draft, obviously, more and more as these weeks go on. But thank you for watching. Hit the like button. If you're on Twitter, or X, I should say, hit the like button, hit the retweet button. Get me some more views. I'd really appreciate that. But that's it. Thank you, guys. We got 228 right now watching. Thank you, guys. I love you guys. Go to bed. It's 10 o'clock. Oh, and when it's 11:11, make a wish. Don't forget. All right, I'm out of here. And, Jonathan, if you're still watching, I know you said Happy New Year to me. But after January 7th, as Curb would say, I think we can chill out with the Happy New Year stuff. But since it was my first pod back, Happy New Year, guys.